All of our narratives are created for the sole purpose of providing entertainment. Our marriage began approximately 3 years ago. Approximately 1 year ago, she initiated an extramarital relationship with one of her colleagues. I began to suspect something was amiss when I observed his vehicle parked outside my residence. These suspicions prompted me to engage the services of a private investigator to gather evidence of her infidelity. It subsequently became evident that my concerns were well-founded. When I discovered the information, I was incensed. To compound matters, the worker's wife called me one day, having discovered the affair as well. She had only managed to obtain text messages exchanged between the two, whereas I had solid proof of their meetings together. We decided it was time to confront our spouses. We met up frequently to discuss the situation. The worker's wife confided in me that she had suspected her husband's affair even during her pregnancy. They have 3 children together. One day, we came up with the idea of seeking revenge by sleeping with each other. The notion of seeking retribution through sexual intercourse was ultimately executed, and I must acknowledge that it was a gratifying experience. We have been engaged in clandestine meetings and an adulterous relationship for a considerable duration. She is an exceptional individual, and I am compelled to concede that in certain aspects of our intimate bond, she surpasses my wife. Nevertheless, the majority of my displeasure is directed towards my wife. I perused some of her correspondences with her illicit partner, and they derisively referenced the worker's wife made cruel comments about her appearance and other derogatory remarks. It is difficult to comprehend how my wife could descend to such a level, particularly given her status as a woman. She even derided my fertility issues, questioning my manhood due to my low chances of having children. I do not experience any remorse for my affair. In fact, I find the physical aspect of my relationship with the co-worker's wife more appealing than my wife. My wife rarely agrees to a blowjob, yet she expects it from me. In contrast, the worker's wife was more enthusiastic about it, making it the most memorable experience I have ever had. Both the co-worker's wife and I are contemplating disclosing our affair to her husband. We have come to realize that our desire for revenge led us to become addicted to the act. I am planning to confront my wife soon and have already prepared the divorce papers. Fortunately, we do not have joint assets or a shared bank account, so the process should be relatively straightforward. The worker's wife may encounter obstacles due to her children, but she has the capacity to financially devastate her husband. I am aware that my actions may be perceived as reprehensible, but I have mentally disengaged from my marriage. I finally served my wife with divorce papers on the 16th of July. I had to take some time to arrange matters before doing so. I decided to serve her at her workplace when she returned home. I had her belongings packed and informed her to stay with her father, as anticipated. She did so. In accordance with the typical behavioral patterns of individuals who have engaged in infidelity, she attempted to elicit sympathy and shift responsibility for her actions onto me. I was prepared for such a response. She was adamant about not leaving and wanted to repair the marriage. I reminded her that the house in question belongs to my parents and that their names are on the title deed. If she did not leave of her own volition, I could call them to have her evicted. I also contacted her sister, hoping that she might intervene. However, her sister blamed me for giving up on the marriage so easily. At this juncture, I felt compelled to point out the inconsistency in her position, given that she had previously left her husband for his cousin. This led to a physical altercation, during which I warned her that her actions constituted a final warning or I would involve the police. After she left messages, I did not block her account, as I wanted to capture some of the messages as evidence. Her tone shifted from apologies to mockery, claiming that she never enjoyed our intimacy and that she was unfaithful to her partner. My partner had been intimate with me in various locations throughout our house. I am unsure of the veracity of these claims, but I have decided to replace the furniture regardless. I was tempted to inform her of the affair my partner was having with her wife and how we had defiled her car, but I restrained myself. During our last conversation, her apology seemed more sincere. She admitted that she had become carried away and that she was now longing to have children. I have previously stated that I am unable to father children. Initially, she wanted to remain childless, but her views have now changed. The woman's biological clock has started ticking. She admitted that she was wrong and that I was the best partner and husband one could have, but she wanted more. I asked her why she did not communicate her desires earlier. We could have explored adoption or sperm banks. I could not help but ask if she was pregnant, and it seemed like she was. She confirmed it. I was aware that this child could not be mine, which meant that any hope of reconciliation was no longer a possibility. I considered that, had I not discovered the affair, she would have presented this pregnancy as a miracle baby. I congratulated her and wished her a wonderful pregnancy. I am seeking a swift conclusion to this divorce. The affair partner's wife has also served her husband with divorce papers and is seeking a fair settlement. She is not willing to concede and has expressed regret for investing her prime years in such a repulsive man. She has even considered leaving her modeling career to be with him. It is worth noting that she still looks fantastic. There has been no communication between us for some time, with the exception of one occasion when she sent me a suggestive text message after consuming alcohol. I declined her invitation. She subsequently apologized, but we do not intend to resume dating until the divorce proceedings have concluded. However, I do miss her. On a more positive note, I have adopted a cat belonging to my soon-to-be former spouse. My wife's aversion to cats will result in the transformation of my residence into a feline-centric domain. For context, my younger brother Mark was romantically involved with my fiancée Jen approximately 1 year ago. Their relationship commenced in August 2022 and concluded a month later due to his disinterest in pursuing a long-term commitment. The relationship was not destined to last, as he was not inclined towards settling down. At the time of their courtship, I was residing in a different state and thus unaware of his romantic involvement. I was similarly unacquainted with Jen until our meeting at a local bar in October of that year. Our initial encounter proved to be a remarkably positive one, and we soon developed a strong rapport. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful and intelligent woman I had ever met. We met on a number of occasions and eventually our relationship became official. Fast forward to December, when I finally introduced her to my family and suggested they meet her during Christmas. They were aware that I was in a relationship, but I tend to be somewhat reserved about my personal life, so I kept the details of her relationship to a minimum until I was sure about the seriousness of our relationship. My parents wanted to see pictures and they began passing my phone around the dinner table. That's when Mark saw it and expressed his displeasure, calling me a terrible brother for dating his ex. My girlfriend and demanded that I terminate the relationship. I refused, and when I discussed the matter with Jen, she confirmed that they had dated and provided details of their separation. It took several weeks, but eventually Mark ceased mentioning that I was dating his former partner. I assumed that he had moved on from the issue. Everything appeared to be normal on Jen's birthday this year. I took her out to a formal dinner, with both of our families in attendance. Mark's family and closest friends were present, and I proposed marriage to her. Mark became enraged, berating me for proposing to her. However, my sisters and I immediately shut him down. This incident occurred just this past weekend, and for the past 2 months, Mark had been relatively quiet about the situation. I did not see him much, and I assumed he had gone into low contact with me, which I did not mind. He then extended an invitation to Jen and me for a family dinner at his apartment, which we accepted. My parents and sisters were also in attendance. I found the invitation somewhat peculiar, but since my parents and sisters were also going, we agreed to attend. The dinner was pleasant and informal. We proceeded to the living room for further conversation after approximately 30 minutes of general discussion. Mark then stood and announced that he had something important to share. He proceeded to deliver an extended oration, expressing his gratification at having his family present for this significant occasion. He then proceeded to assume a kneeling position and present a ring of questionable quality to Jen, proposing marriage. Jen's demeanor indicated confusion and discomfort, prompting her to request that he remove the ring and stand. My father attempted to intercede, but I was first to respond, striking Mark. The majority of his subsequent utterances were inaudible to me due to my emotional state. I was enraged, but I believe the gist of what he was trying to do was prove that Jen was not genuinely interested in me and was merely seeking retribution before things could escalate further. My parents promptly ushered me out, assuring me they would speak to Mark. Several days have passed since this incident, and I am still seething with rage. I am unsure how to proceed. I am concerned that Jen may have second thoughts about marrying me. I would like to address a few points that were raised in the comments. Jen and I are newly engaged. It was a situation in which we both felt that it was the real deal. It may seem fast, but I am absolutely certain about her. When we first met, I was the one who initiated the conversation, not the other way around. I am unsure if she was aware or suspected that we were related in some way. Upon learning of her previous relationship with Mark, I inquired about it, and she asserted that she was unaware of any such connection. While I had no reason to doubt her, Mark's rather intense reaction did prompt some curiosity on my part. In fact, I was previously unaware that she and Mark had been romantically involved when I first met her. To be frank, Mark and I are not particularly close. We were once quite close during our younger years, but as we grew up, we gradually drifted apart and communicated less frequently. Prior to my relocation, Jen and I had minimal contact, with our interactions confined to special occasions such as birthdays. I was aware of Jen's familiarity with my family, yet I did not divulge much information about them until I deemed it appropriate to introduce her to them. When Mark and Jen crossed paths once more, I did not perceive any residual feelings from either of them. She did not treat him like a complete stranger, but she was not overly affectionate with him either. I was informed that their relationship lasted only a month, a period of time that I did not believe required Mark's permission to propose to Jen. However, I may have been mistaken about that. I am still uncertain about that. I intend to have a conversation with Mark this weekend to gain a deeper understanding of the situation. I acknowledge that I did not solicit his perspective on the nature of their relationship, which was an error on my part. I recently contacted Mark and extended an invitation for a discussion at my residence. I suggested that it would be preferable for Jen to be present during the conversation, but I was amenable to speaking with him individually if that was his preference. He agreed to meet with both of us and arrived at my residence at approximately noon today. There was a brief period of silence before I initiated the conversation, during which I expressed my regret for. I informed him of my intention to propose to Jen and apologized for the physical altercation between us. He responded with a somewhat nonchalant whatever, but acknowledged the apology. I proceeded to share with him what Jen had told me about their past relationship and breakup. When I asked her about it, I wanted him to confirm if her account was accurate. I essentially expressed that his reactions throughout this whole ordeal have seemed quite extreme, and I wanted to ensure I wasn't misunderstanding the depth of their relationship or underestimating its significance. Mark confirmed. The couple had been together for only a few weeks, and Mark had initiated the breakup because he had lost interest. Jen then asked if his recent behavior was because he still had feelings or regrets about ending things with her. Mark admitted that he thought she looked more attractive than when he had last seen her, but he emphasized that he had no lingering feelings or regrets. He explained that he didn't like the idea of his younger brother dating someone he had dated even if it was for a short period. Mark felt that, as a man, he shouldn't have pursued a relationship with his ex. Given the strength of our family ties, I reminded him that I was unaware of the nature of their previous relationship, and therefore that my decision to pursue this relationship was not a deliberate choice. He dismissed this, insisting that I should have ended things regardless. He also stated that, were the roles reversed, he would have done the same. I had my doubts about this and questioned why he had proposed to her in the first place. He proposed to her because he believed that she was aware of the family connection between him and Mark. This was suggested by one of his friends who was present during Mark and Jen's relationship. It was thought that Jen was using this connection to get back at him, especially since she had some unresolved feelings following their breakup. It was believed that Jen would choose Mark over me if she was still interested in him. The hypothesis was tested by having Mark propose to her and observe her response. Jen requested that he clarify his rationale for believing that she was still emotionally attached to him. He stated that he had heard that she had inquired about him after the breakup and had seen her at locations they had previously frequented, which led him to assume that she might still have feelings for him. Jen clarified that she had only inquired about him on a single occasion following the dissolution of their relationship. Prior to the commencement of their romantic involvement, she had been socializing at these locations with her friends. She asserted that she would not eschew these places solely on the basis of a previous relationship and expressed her disquiet at the suggestion that she would pursue a relationship with him with the intention of seeking retribution. He offered her an apology but insisted that she consider his perspective. He questioned whether she was genuinely unaware of the existence of our relationship, and she explained that she had not perceived a resemblance between us until we were in the same room and that our personalities were markedly different, therefore it had never occurred to her. He acknowledged this and concluded the conversation. He offered a heartfelt apology but urged her to consider his perspective. He questioned whether she was genuinely unaware of our relationship. She explained that she had not noticed the resemblance between us until we were in the same room, whereupon she observed that our personalities were quite different and that it had never crossed her mind. He acknowledged this and concluded the conversation before leaving. He mentioned that I could retract his wedding invitation because he was unable to support our relationship, given his history with her. I informed him that he was unlikely to be invited in any case. Several hours have elapsed since our conversation, and I am somewhat reassured. My parents were not pleased about his exclusion, but they accepted that it was a mutual decision. The decision was, in my estimation, the optimal one. My sisters endorsed my decision, opining that he lacked a valid rationale for his actions. They did not blame me for my reluctance to include him in the wedding festivities. I intend to limit my interactions with Mark, and I believe he will similarly refrain from contacting me in the near future. Here is an update on the situation. I have maintained a distance from Mark since our last conversation. There has been no communication between the two parties, and they have only interacted during family gatherings. Currently, my mother is upset that Mark is still not invited to my wedding. The issue was raised during my younger sister Sophie's 22nd birthday celebration. Her boyfriend, with whom she has been in a relationship for approximately 4 years, proposed to her that night. We were discussing her dream wedding plans, which she had mentioned. The notion of a destination wedding was discussed, as were the details of the cake and dress. Then, in a casual manner, the subject of Mark's exclusion from the wedding was raised. The response was something along the lines of, "Teddy, I am aware that Mark is not permitted at your wedding, but I am sure you will not mind if he attends mine." I responded with a laugh and reassured her that I would not be upset about the guest list, even if I had the desire to be. However, my mother gave me a peculiar look and inquired if Mark was still excluded from my wedding. I confirmed that he was still excluded from the wedding. My mother appeared irritated and accused me of being unreasonable for banning him since he is family. She suggested that I was holding on to a grudge out of pettiness. I reminded her that Mark and I had both agreed that he would not attend. I also pointed out that this was not an appropriate time to discuss my wedding, given that it was Sophie's special day. I also mentioned that if either Mark or my mother wished to discuss my wedding, they could contact me separately. Sophie even interjected, expressing her frustration with my mother attempting to make her day about Mark. This seemed to put an end to the topic. For the record, Mark did not attend Sophie's party because he had to work and was unable to attend a few days later. My mother subsequently paid me a visit and wanted to. She inquired as to why I was so adamant about preventing Mark from being present at the event. She asserted that I should not be insecure about Mark and Jen's past relationship and that my decision to exclude him was excessive. I clarified that Mark and I had mutually agreed on his absence, and if he had objections, he could address me directly. Our discussion culminated in a disagreement, during which she suggested that if I did not, she then suggested that I should reconsider my decision and invite Mark to the wedding. However, I informed her that if she wished to attend, she would have to request an invitation directly from me, as I would not ask her to reconsider her decision to exclude her son from the event. She then asked if I would be upset if she did not attend. I informed her that it would not be the first occasion that she had missed one of my events due to Mark's presence. I was accused of being inconsiderate for bringing up her past mistakes, and she subsequently departed from the conversation in a highly agitated state. I subsequently received a series of messages and calls from her and a few family members, all of whom claimed that I was in the wrong and urged me to invite Mark in order to maintain peace. My mother has also reached out to Jen, requesting that she speak with me and persuade me to reconsider my position. However, as far as I am aware, Jen has not yet responded to this request. Thus far, the majority of my mother's relatives have expressed support for her decision and have indicated that they will not be attending the wedding. Conversely, my father's side of the family, including my aunt, uncle, and their children, as well as my sisters and Jen's family, have all stated that they intend to attend. I have also discussed the situation with Mark and inquired about any potential issues he may have with not receiving an invitation. He essentially conveyed that he uninvited himself and states that he does not comprehend why this is perceived as a significant issue, as he has no intention of attending. He recommended that I refrain from involving him in the conflict, as he is not a party to it, and indicated that he would convey the same to my mother. Currently, I am maintaining minimal contact with my mother, but my relationship with my father remains relatively amicable. I am still contemplating whether should my mother and her family change their minds about the boycott, I would consider inviting them to attend the wedding again. However, realistically, the chances of this are slim. I have discussed this with my father, who understands the situation. Currently, Jen and I are exploring the possibility of reducing the number of guests at the wedding, as the guest list has significantly shrunk. My mother remains uninvited from the wedding indefinitely, approximately 2 weeks after she was initially excluded. She did not attend the gathering, but instead came by to express her desire to clear the air and discuss everything. We agreed and invited her in for dinner. Jen prepared a plate of food for her, and I inquired as to whether she still planned on skipping the wedding. She explained that she wanted to come but could not get past the fact that I had not invited Mark due to a simple mistake. I reminded her that Mark's simple mistake she was proposing to my fiancée with me sitting just a few feet away, and she dismissed it as a joke. Jen inquired as to why she wanted to talk if she maintained the same stance on Mark attending the wedding. She replied that she wanted to have a conversation with Jen and hoped Jen would listen to her and persuade me to invite Mark again. She had apparently assumed I was at work and thought Jen suggested that she could converse with my mother in private. My mother replied that even without my presence she would not have initiated that conversation because it concerned my brother. At one point, my mother made a remark that implied Jen lacked the courage to engage in a conversation without my input. This prompted a heated exchange between the three of us, after which Jen instructed my mother to leave. My mother continued to accuse Jen as she headed for the door. The situation rapidly deteriorated, with my mother even pulling Jen's hair and forcing her to the ground while continuing to shout. She physically assaulted Jen, attempting to scratch her face. I intervened, pulling my mother away from her and escorting her outside. My mother continued to bang on the door for a few minutes, but I ensured that Jen was safe before leaving. She persisted in calling both of us repeatedly. Once I was certain that Jen was unharmed, I sent a text to my mother, making it clear that it would be prudent for her to refrain from further communication, as we have no intention of initiating contact. I also contacted my father and sisters to inform them of the incident. My father seemed taken aback and attempted to make excuses, citing my mother's stress regarding the situation. My sisters, on the other hand, seemed to anticipate such an outburst, describing my mother as having always been volatile. They offered to come over and check on Jen. I inquired of Jen whether she wished to. She declined to press charges, stating her intention to sever all contact with my mother permanently. I advised her to consider speaking with the police, given that she had been physically offended. However, she is reluctant for my mother to be arrested. Fortunately, my sisters and Jen's mother were able to provide comfort, and she is currently coping well. My mother is unable to communicate with Jen unless she chooses to do so. I am uncertain about the best way to proceed. Jen is opposed to involving the police. However, my sisters and I believe it is necessary to have a record in case of future incidents. In an update, some people asked about my strained relationship with my mother and why I had not been open with Jen about my parents. We thought it might help to provide some background on our complicated family dynamics, as some of you mentioned that my brother Mark was the favored child in my mother's eyes and that she did not make much effort to hide it. Our parents did not spend much quality time together. With my sisters and I often leaving us with a babysitter, however, they would frequently spend time with Mark, taking him shopping while we stayed home or buying him his favorite food and toys separately from their regular shopping trips. Mark typically received better things than the rest of us. He would get new, expensive clothes while ours were thrift or brand new toys just for him, whereas we had to share our old toys with each other. If my sisters and I received gifts, it was evident that Mark's belongings were exclusively his and that we were not permitted to touch them when Mark misbehaved. I frequently faced the consequences for failing to set an appropriate example or teach him how to behave. For instance, if Mark broke his toys, I was punished because it was assumed that I was the source of his behavior. This was despite the fact that Mark was 8 years old at the time and had been in trouble at school for attempting to push another child down the stairs. As a result, I was grounded. For a period of 2 weeks, I was compelled to express remorse to the other child for failing to adequately supervise my brother's conduct. Upon reaching the age of 13, I began to advocate for the introduction of an allowance. My parents initially agreed, but on the condition that I would perform various domestic tasks, including lawn care, waste disposal, and leaf collection. In return, they would provide me with approximately $125 weekly, which I could then use to accumulate savings. However, circumstances shifted when Mark became aware of my financial compensation and subsequently requested an allowance of his own from our parents. My parents took $110 from my weekly allowance and gave it to Mark, despite his lack of contribution to household tasks. When I asked Mark to help with chores, he often dismissed his responsibility by stating that it was not his job. As a result of this, I began to distance myself from Mark. By the time I entered high school, we only spoke when we needed to request favors or when there was no other option. At the age of 17, I desired to purchase my own vehicle and have financial resources that my parents were not entitled to share with Mark. My elder sister, Maggie, assisted me in opening a bank account and taught me the principles of budgeting and prudent saving. Eventually, at the age of 18, after considerable effort, I acquired my first vehicle. However, when Mark obtained his driving license, my parents inquired as to whether he could utilize my vehicle for transportation and additional practice. I was initially reluctant, but eventually agreed, and the arrangement continued for some time. Mark would use my vehicle when I was not in need of the vehicle and he was maintaining it to a reasonable standard. However, when he began to insist that our parents purchase him a car of his own, my mother approached me and demanded that I relinquish my vehicle because he required it more. When I declined, she threatened to evict me that night. We engaged in a heated discussion, and she ultimately marked my card, forcing me to transfer ownership within a few days since I had nowhere else to go at the time. I acquiesced reluctantly when upon graduating from high school, both of my parents elected to skip my graduation ceremony, citing Mark's unwillingness to attend. My mother was reluctant to leave him alone for the night, leaving me with the support of my sisters and my aunt and uncle, who had planned to take me out to celebrate. However, they were compelled to bring me home upon my parents' request, as they had prepared a meal to make up for missing the ceremony. I was unable to consume the meal due to my mother had placed shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish. I am allergic to shellfish. In my first year after high school, I worked 2 jobs to save up and buy myself another car. When the new school year started, I moved away for college and decided to cut off contact with my parents. They, mostly my mother, tried reaching out through social media and my sister Sophie during the first few months, but I ignored them. I even warned Sophie that I would cut her off too if she kept. My mother attempted to mediate when I was unable to be reached through my sister Sophie. She also contacted my older sister Charlotte and, on a few occasions, my cousin Maggie and my uncle Mark. I even threatened to file a restraining order for harassment, although it was merely a bluff on my part, as I was unaware of the procedure. This did, however, result in her cessation of contact. The only messages I received from her were the occasional holiday text sent around the time I relocated. My cousin Charlotte informed me that these were the only instances of communication between us. I was reluctant to engage in therapy with a family member at Charlotte's behest, particularly given my parents' desire to express remorse for their actions. However, I consented on the condition that they demonstrate sincerity and commitment to reconciliation. My decision to resume contact with them following my return home was influenced by the profound impact of their actions. It required significant personal growth for me to even consider re-establishing a relationship with them, particularly given the uncertainty surrounding my relationship with Jen. I had previously avoided mentioning my family because I was prepared to terminate contact if necessary. Jen was understanding of the sensitivity of the subject and did not inquire further. In response to the most common question regarding my decision to reconnect after the aforementioned events, I would simply state that I would do anything for my sister. Charlotte desired the presence of the entire family at the birth of her first child and during the subsequent adjustment period. She did not wish to exclude any individuals. Aunts and uncles who only visited their niece on birthdays and holidays. She was never one to ask for much. Growing up, I was aware that Charlotte had a tendency to be overly generous with her family. When she asked if I would be willing to try for her, I agreed because it would make her happy. I also had a glimmer of hope that maybe they had changed. I don't regret trying to reconcile. It is possible that my parents may still be difficult, but I have now met the love of my life. Therefore, I consider this to be a positive outcome. Some people have expressed interest in learning whether there have been any recent developments. In response, I will provide an update on the situation. I apologize if the following information is confusing or difficult to understand. A great deal has occurred since the last update. We have decided to file a report with the police. A report was filed with the police, who informed us that, although Jen does not wish to pursue legal action, it is not solely our decision as to whether it should go further. However, they assured us that they would consider our preferences. We provided substantial evidence, including photos of Jen's injuries and text messages between my mother, my father, and myself discussing what had occurred. The police advised us to report and document any further incidents involving my mother in case anything else happened. Given our location, we doubt it will lead to much, but at least we have it on record. I received approximately 100 angry text messages indicating it has been confirmed that the incident has been discussed with my mother. Upon my departure from work, my mother attempted to confront me and proceeded to verbally abuse me, accusing me of attempting to ruin her life. She repeatedly asserted that I am a terrible son for attempting to have her arrested over a minor misunderstanding. I was unable to comprehend why she was being subjected to such a severe penalty. I informed her that if she did not wish to face legal consequences, she should not have assaulted Jen. She insisted that I should contact the police to have the report withdrawn, but I declined, explaining to her that the officer had stated that the matter was beyond my control. She subsequently experienced a psychological crisis in the parking lot, striking me on several occasions before security personnel intervened and removed her from the premises. I was obliged to inform my superior of the incident when I returned to work. Fortunately, she was understanding. After I had provided her with a full account of events when I got home, I informed Jen of what had transpired. She was understandably upset and proposed that we discuss how to handle my family moving forward. We engaged in a lengthy conversation, seeking advice from Reddit users, and ultimately decided to maintain complete no contact with my family, with the exception of my sisters. We both concurred that maintaining contact with them was not in the best interests of either party. In our discussions, it became evident that my partner's desire to create distance between us and my family was causing her unnecessary stress. She had previously attempted to avoid involvement in my family issues, believing it was not her place to do so. However, she was unwilling to tolerate her own parents' behavior or her father's enabling of her mother's actions. During our conversation, we covered a great deal of ground. However, I concurred with my partner's assessment that my family was causing more trouble than they were worth. I was also in agreement with her decision to end contact with them. Following our discussion, Jen assisted me in locating a therapist. I proceeded to contact my father to inform him of our decision to cease all communication. He did not respond to my initial call, so I left a message requesting a serious conversation. When he returned my call, he inquired as to whether it was permissible for my mother to. I concurred with her assessment that my family was causing more trouble than they were worth. I also agreed to seek therapy, and Jen is helping me find a therapist following our discussion. I called my father and informed him of our decision to go no contact. He did not answer my first call, so I left a message requesting a serious conversation. When he returned my call, the conversation did not proceed smoothly. I explained to both of them that Jen and I were cutting them out of our lives. My father demanded to know why I was taking such a drastic step, especially after all I informed him that the effort we had invested in repairing our relationship had not been reciprocated. I highlighted that the situation with Mark had demonstrated that our relationship was not genuinely repaired from their perspective. I emphasized that their world revolved around my mother and my younger brother, Mark. I also drew attention to the ongoing favoritism towards Mark, which I felt was detrimental to the relationship. I had reached the conclusion that our relationship was beyond repair due to Mark's actions. I had initially agreed to reconcile for Charlotte's sake, but I was no longer willing to tolerate the disrespect shown towards both Jen and me. I was acting in the best interests of both of us. I informed my mother that I was exhausted from her using me as a scapegoat for her parenting failures and Mark's behavior. I made it clear that I would never forgive her for what she had done to Jen and for her mistreatment of me and my sisters throughout our upbringing. She began to suggest that I should move on like my sisters have, but I interrupted her and stated that she should accept that I informed her that I would never forgive her, particularly given her recent behavior. This prompted her to cry and accuse me of treating her like a villain. I responded by stating that she should take responsibility for her actions as I had done nothing wrong. This led to a further intense exchange. A verbal altercation ensued between her and Jen, during which Jen employed a colorful vocabulary to describe her, along with a plethora of other pejorative epithets. It is unclear whether my mother exited the room or simply chose to remain silent, but she ceased speaking when Jen had her say. My father expressed his disquiet at being excluded from my life and implored me to empathize with my mother's perspective. He also noted that he expressed concern that I was being unfair by punishing my mother for her challenges in raising and caring for us. He concluded by stating that we were a family and that my past mistakes should not hinder our ability to move forward together. In response, I informed him that my mother had only ever cared for Mark and herself and that nothing he could say or do would change my mind. I informed him that he was at liberty to retain my number, but that I would be blocking him and my mother on all platforms. Furthermore, I stated that I would not be contacting him again before hanging up. I then drafted a lengthy email, attaching the link to my posts and uninviting all but my aunt and uncle and my sisters to the wedding. I had not shed tears for a considerable period, but Jen comforted me while I cried after sending the email. The email provided reassurance that the situation would be resolved. My sisters also contacted me after reading the email. I apologized to Charlotte for being unable to continue reconciliation as she had hoped, but she reassured me, stating that it was acceptable and not my fault that I had to terminate contact once more. The response from my family has been diverse. Some are displeased that I shared family issues on a public internet forum. Some individuals have expressed displeasure at my parents, citing their lack of awareness regarding the gravity of the situation. The most recent individual I discussed the matter with was Mark. He inquired as to whether I was severing ties with him as well. I informed him that I was not, but that I would not be making additional efforts to maintain contact. He did not contest this and merely wished me well with the wedding. Since then, I have not spoken with Mark. Currently, Jen and I are in the process of we are currently seeking to relocate to a new residence. Our plan is to move closer to Jen's brother, who lives approximately 3 hours away from our current location in a city that we both find agreeable. I have discussed the possibility of transferring with my employer, and Jen is exploring the option of working remotely or finding a new position. Additionally, our wedding venue has changed once more, given that our guest list is now significantly smaller. I am currently awaiting further developments. The possibility of utilizing the lake house belonging to the aforementioned individual for the purpose of the wedding is currently under consideration. It is my intention to refrain from posting any further updates on this situation unless a significant development occurs. This is to be the case at least until after the wedding, as I am keen to progress with our lives. However, I will endeavor to address any questions that some of you may have. Edit: I am already anticipating the potential consequences of our move. There is a possibility that she will follow us, given her tendency to exhibit obsessive behavior when she does not get her way. I have consulted with a lawyer friend to explore the possibility of obtaining a restraining order to prevent her from causing trouble once we relocate.